war is a racket, Smedley Butler wrote in 1935. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. Smedley Butler spent 33 years in the Marines, attaining the rank of Major General. By the time of his death, he was the most decorated Marine in history. Yet Butler became one of America's most vocal anti-imperialists. He spent much of his career in Latin America, where his experiences left him convinced that war served the interests of corporations, while soldiers and taxpayers shouldered the costs. To understand U.S. intervention in Latin America, we first have to look at how America's foreign policy shifted after the Spanish-American War. Faced with the decision of what to do with Cuba, the U.S. granted Cuba limited autonomy on the condition America would be able to intervene for the preservation of Cuban independence. In 1904, President Teddy Roosevelt extended this policy to all Latin American countries. In other words, under the guise of protecting Latin America's independence, the U.S. government claimed the right to military intervention in the region. Roosevelt announced his policy in 1904, retroactively justifying military actions already underway. A year earlier, the military had ordered Smedley Butler to Honduras to quell civil unrest. This began his participation in the Latin American conflicts known as the Banana Wars. In 1899, American businessman Minor Keith established the United Fruit Company, which survives today as Chiquita. Keith wanted to expand his banana export business, as bananas had proven immensely popular in the U.S. after their introduction in 1870. In exchange for land, United Fruit partnered with Central American governments to build infrastructure, but the company quickly faced competition from other American exporters, such as Cuyamel and Standard Fruit. The companies backed rival politicians, exacerbating domestic unrest in the countries they operated in, which became known as banana republics. This is the context behind Butler's statement that he helped make Honduras right for the American fruit companies in 1903. Witnessing the military protect corporate interests, Butler blamed capitalism, but he was actually railing against corporatism. Under capitalism, both profits and losses are privatized, but corporatism socializes losses. Butler acknowledged that taxpayers and soldiers bore the costs of the wars that corporations profited from. This public-private partnership is similar to the medieval alliance of throne and altar, in which the Pope anointed monarchs, legitimizing their rule, and monarchs protected the Catholic Church's religious monopoly. Today, many politicians similarly support corporate privileges in exchange for political support, which can include military intervention that benefits multinational companies. But wars also depend on popular support, and in World War I, President Woodrow Wilson would create the first federal agency to create and distribute wartime propaganda.
It really is my opinion that the media in general are so bad. We would have to question whether the world wouldn't be better off without them altogether. There's some very, very fine journalists, and we work with many of them, and some fine media organizations, but the vast majority are awful and are so distortive to how the world actually is, that the result is we see wars and we see corrupt governments continue on. One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it. If they had searched deep enough, if they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment.
I appeared before the Congressional Committee, the highest representation of the American people, under subpoena to tell what I knew of activities which I believe might lead to an attempt to set up a fascist dictatorship. My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institution. I want to retain the right to vote, the right to speak freely, and the right to write. If we maintain these basic principles, our democracy is safe. No dictatorship can exist with suffrage, freedom of speech and press.